In 1952, London's drastic air pollution created a thick fog. It was so thick, buses had to be led by someone in front of them. This killer fog resulted in 3,000 deaths. In October 1948, in Donora, Pennsylvania, a 5-day pollution cloud resulted in 20 deaths and caused sickness in 6,000 of the town's 14,000 people. To prevent more deaths from occurring in the future due to polluted air, and to protect the environment, the Clean Air Act was created.
The Clean Air Act was first passed in 1963, but didn't address the issue of air pollution until it was revised in 1970. This act created the Environmental Protection Agency. This organization strives to control air pollution and guarantee clean air for all people to breathe.
Because the air we breathe is so important to our overall health and well-being, the Clean Air Act requires EPA to review the NAAQS every 5 years to make sure that they continue to protect public health with an adequate margin of safety. For at-risk groups, including millions of adults and children who have asthma, this is critical. Establishing and implementing a NAAQS is a two-step process for improving air quality. Setting the standards is step one. It is about defining what is clean air to protect public health. Implementing the standards is step two and involves the federal government, states, and tribes, if they wish to, putting measures and programs in place to reduce harmful pollution.
The EPA sets national health-based standards to protect against pollutants including ozone, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, lead, and particulate soot. State governments must devise cleanup plans to meet the health standards by a specific date. They also set regulations on other things like automobiles, trucks, and electric power plants. This legislation authorized the development of comprehensive federal and state regulations to limit emissions from both industrial sources and mobile sources.
The EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency, sets limits on certain air pollutants. It limits emissions of air pollutants coming from sources like chemical plants, utilities, and steel mills. Basically, the EPA sets the lowest standard, and states can make their own laws, but they must be at least as high as the federal standard.
The Idaho Department of Environmental Quality enforces air quality regulations from the Clean Air Act at the state level, as well as issue permits and provide air quality reports.
For this review, EPA examined thousands of scientific studies, and based on the law, based on a thorough review of the science, based on the recommendations of the agency's independent scientific advisors, and based on the assessment of EPA scientists and technical experts, the administrator has proposed to strengthen the standards to within a range of 65 to 70 parts per billion to better protect Americans' health and welfare. This is a proposal, and taking public comment on a range is exactly how the process is supposed to work. The agency welcomes comments on all aspects of the proposal, including on setting the level as low as 60 parts per billion, and we will accept comment on retaining the existing standard as well.
Every time the liberals get into office, they pass an omnibus bill of big spending projects. What we need to do is pass the mother of all repeal bills, but it's the repeal bill that will get of job-killing regulations. And I would begin with the EPA, because there is no other agency like the EPA. It should really be renamed the Job-Killing Organization of America.
According to the New York Times, the EPA has become a target of many politicians, predominantly those belonging to the Republican Party. Politicians like Michelle Bachmann, Newt Gingrich, Rick Perry, and Ron Paul have taken a stance against the Environmental Protection Agency, and they believe that the EPA is too restrictive and should be amended to reduce the powers of the agency. Conservatives typically lobby for more economic freedom, so logically they don't easily accept strong regulations imposed on them by a federal agency that interferes with their business.
Changing laws is Congress's job, not a regulatory agency's. EPA's actions on greenhouse gases could force new unrealistic requirements on more than 6 million U.S. businesses. The United States needs to protect the environment, but it's time for EPA to stop overreaching its authority. They should leave crafting legislation to our elected officials, and they should not push political agendas instead of realistic science. It ultimately could cost millions of American jobs, increase energy costs, and put U.S. businesses at a competitive disadvantage in the global race for energy.
The Union of Concerned Scientists is a nonprofit science advocacy organization based in the United States. They seek to use science to find practical solutions to today's major problems. In 2011, the Union of Concerned Scientists sent a letter to Congress showing their approval and support for the EPA and stronger pollution restrictions. They argue that the act has prevented 400,000 premature deaths and hundreds of millions of cases of respiratory and cardiovascular disease during the 40 years since it was first passed, all without diminishing economic growth.
According to Emily Atkins' article, emissions of benzene have dropped 66%, mercury from man-made sources has dropped 60%, and lead 84% since 1990. This report was the second and final required update to Congress about how effective the 1990 updates to the Clean Air Act have been. Those updates to the law required EPA to take specific actions to reduce air pollution, to establish partnerships with state and local governments to solve local pollution problems, to track progress on pollution reduction efforts, and to hold education and outreach activities about air toxics.
The Clean Air Act is important to you and me because it has significantly reduced our exposure to harmful pollutants. We have more resources, our environment is cleaner and purer. Air pollution affects everyone, not just those who have asthma and other respiratory or heart conditions. It can lead to cancer, birth defects, brain, nerve, and lung damage. The Clean Air Act and the EPA have set regulations to reduce the amount of air pollution in America to protect us from its harmful effects. This act has saved lives and improved the quality of life for millions of Americans, just like you and me, and enables us to live our lives more fully and to discover our own American dream.